Shini?
Will you put up the video of Kiran?
We can start in a minute.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Let's start in a minute.
Okay, can you start? Good afternoon. I am Richard Mahapatra from Down to Earth magazine and welcome you all to this special webinar. And we have been doing it in a series, as you must have watched out in the last 2 months kind of things. But this one is special. And we are a magazine genetic by environment. We every minute, every hour, every day, 365 days, we report and research on environment. Down to Earth is all about that. And so is CSE. CSE has been doing it for more than 30 years and Down to Earth for around 29 years now. Then the world fixed a day, Environment Day. So that's sometimes very unusual for Environment Day to actually, for Environment magazine to celebrate an Environment Day when we live it every minute. But since last 5 years, we have been actually observing the Environment Day. And as usual, we release this State of India's Environment Report in figures. And as you know that Down to Earth and CSE come out with 2 annuals. One is the State of India's Environment that comes in print on January 1st. And this one is State of India's Environment in figures. As the name suggests, is released every June 5th or to mark the World Environment Day. And as the name suggests, it's all about data. The story of India's environment or the state of environment in India is told through data and numbers. And this time the context is also very different. And just imagine it's for more than, it's almost 6 months, we have been actually breathing in and out numbers. And we all know what is the number of cases. That's all about COVID now. So check out actually the number of cases, number of deaths, number of districts impacted, number of countries impacted every minute. So one way I think we never bothered about numbers as much as we are living with it now. And we'll be releasing actually the 5th State of India's Environment Report in figures. And yes, you will find the COVID being reflected there also. And why do, just before I introduce my panelist, I just want to brief you that why we do actually come out with a report entirely told through numbers only. I'll just say that every number is a story. Number is secular. It doesn't lie, it doesn't excite. A number is a number, it's a fact. It has its own story. And with numbers actually, we are much more effective in communications and in understanding a development. So that's why we do this. And to release this, we have, and the discussion around the report, I have a panelist, Ms. Sunita Narayan. You all know her. And she's the editor of Down to Earth and the Director General of Center for Science and Environment, CSE. And I have Kiran Pandey and Rajit Sengupta. Kiran and Rajit have actually put this report together, and they actually steer the DTE and CSE data center and have been instrumental in bringing out this annual publications. And most of the number crunching is also done here by them. And they had this team. So they will also explain you what it takes to do this. And as I told you, means it will be a discussions around the findings of the report, and will inform you how you do, how and why we do this. And also it involves a very formal release. Remember, it's a e-book which you have to buy. And the condition is such that we are doing a almost an electronic virtual release. And I am feel very odd about it, but may I request now Ms. Sunita Narayan to do the honor of releasing our e-book first time in virtually? Okay.
Thank you, Richard. This is the release, the formal release of our report. I have to say, this is the most weird moment in my life when I am doing a virtual release of an ebook. Clearly, it is what the world is all about. But thank you, Richard, for giving me the honor to release the report, and the report is formally released now. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'll straight go into the details of the report, and finally asking Sunita ji to actually give you the findings. But just to some messages, just to keep it structured and all these things, all your questions and answers from the participants should go into the question and answer box. And at the end, we'll try to answer. And when the presentation is also made on the findings, you might have few queries that also you can keep it in the question and answer. And later on also we'll all available to answer that, because these are numbers and it doesn't always warrant immediate interpretations and this thing. So now I'll straight come to Rajit Sen Gupta. And Rajit, welcome. And I'll ask Rajit to take us through, why we do this in numbers despite writing in and out every moment, and why this annual state of environment report completely through data, and why it makes sense and more effective it is now. Rajit.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the webinar once again. My name is Rajesh Sengupta, and I work as an assistant editor in Down to Earth. I'll just briefly tell you what I do. So I'm an assistant editor in Down to Earth, and I have been working with data extensively for the past 5 years. So I hope you all are safe and healthy, and you enjoy the book once it is released, and you buy the book as well. So I'll tell you what went behind the minds before we started coming out with this book. So we realized that most of the conversations about social trends that begin and end with generalizations about, let's say, how the society is moving, whether it's going from good to bad or from bad to good. So as an environmental NGO, our focus has always been to try to translate this general idea or the general will of the people into something more concrete and something more tangible. So that is exactly where we decided that if we are able to exploit data and we are able to come out with relevant data to, first of all, understand what is being said and what is general discourse of the people, and second of all, to help people understand what these things, how these things have an impact. So that was basically the idea behind why we came out with this. And the best part about this is that we realized over the period of time that there are a lot of government data available, there are a lot of credible information available. What we need to do is basically sift through it to find relevant things and to understand what kind of an impact they have. So primarily what I'm going to do right now is I'll just quickly take a few minutes to talk about what is the process that we follow in releasing this book. The idea behind it is that what we've realized is to have the best impact of this book is to understand the rationale behind it, and also to be able to use this data to tell your own stories and to help you understand the complex things that are happening around us better. So can I ask Kiran to start the PPT presentation? Kiran?
Yeah, Rajit?
Yep.
Continue.
Rajit, a little louder, Rajit.
Yeah.
Okay, your voice is floating a little bit, so speak a little louder. Okay.
Perfect, ma'am. Yeah.
So Rajat, you can start now.
Yes,
Okay.
please start, Kiran. You haven't put the presentation on, Kiran, yet.
I have put on. Rajat says on.
No,
Rajat,
it isn't.
It
it's
is.
on.
Okay. So
So it is passed.
okay, so I'll just take it up from there. So I'll just tell you what the process has been so far. So
Rajat,
in fact, how
Rajat,
yes,
I would
yes, ma'am.
suggest you share your own screen so we start off. We don't lose more time. Kiran,
Yeah.
the screen sharing is not working. So
Say
just
it's
see what
paused.
you can fix for your own presentation.
Okay.
Rajit, you please go ahead with the
Yes, ma'am.
screen sharing that you had.
Kiran, you have to.
Yeah, Kiran, stop sharing the screen, please.
I stopped.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Rajat.
Yeah. So just to give a snapshot of the book, we this year have been able to get 15 chapters. They have got 42 distinct infographics on everything that relate to us, and there are 176 pages in it. So what I just spoke about, I just reiterate that. So the idea is to move or understand the generic or the general conversations that are happening around us into something more specific and something more tangible. And to be able to have real-time assessment so that we are able to correct the projects and policies. And we have realized that there are millions of stories that are available. And just what we need to do is understand the metadata and to be able to narrate the stories very, very effectively. So I'll just jump into the process that we follow. So the first is that we go through the process of identifying the focus area. In fact, this is something that depends on what is happening around us. In fact, one of the last chapters that we added to this year's SOA was the chapter on the performance of discoms or the electricity distribution companies. And the decision was taken after the announcement came in that the government is going to release another bailout package for the discoms. And while the general media was talking about how it is important during the COVID, and which is understandable if they are going through a tough patch, everybody needs money. But we realized while we were going through the data, and this is where what is interesting about it, when we we're going through the data, we realized that there have been 4 bailout packages in the past, I think, 1.5 decades. And 3 of those have happened in the past 8 years. And the beauty of that was that every time the government was doling out money, they were saying the same thing, that they will force these discoms to improve their efficiency. So it was the same template being thrown out every time. However, a few years later, the situation was exactly the same. So this was one story that we thought it needs to be a part of our SOA in figures. And this is basically what we looked at. So basically, what are the policies, what were the announcements that were made at the point in time? What were the things that the discoms promised they would do? And how nothing has changed ever since, except the fact that they're bleeding. So the first is, so this is how we identify the focus areas, things that matter. One of them, as Richard rightly pointed out, was COVID and the different impacts of COVID on our lives right now. Then the second process, second part of the process is we identify the resources and the platforms, or in terms of the data sources that we're looking at. Kiran would be discussing that at length shortly afterwards. And the third part is getting all that data and sorting it and cleaning the data. And the fourth part, this is where things get really interesting. We start visualizing the data. So this is challenging and interesting at the same time, in the sense getting all the pieces of information and weaving them together into something which tells a big story. And finally, we then fine tune it, and then we analyze the data and we push it out. So one of the analysis is how discoms have been regularly given money without improving the efficiency, which is basically what they should be doing. And this is what they have promised to do every time they have been given rollouts. So finally, I would get into why do we do this? So That is one of the primary reasons that makes all of this, the entire process meaningful, is that we try to make data into something more actionable and something that is more tangible. And we realize that making data meaningful, to make it relevant to the common people, that is the beauty of it. So when government releases any piece of information, or whatever the government does, has some ramifications on our life. The only problem is that most of the time it is so cryptic or so heavy sounding that we are not able to understand the impact of it. So we try to simplify that through SOA in figures, so that people can understand the impact of these government decisions on their lives, and people can also take it forward from there. And lastly, we run a lot of trainings, and this is part of that same thing, the process behind it. So when you're reading through the individual data chapters, you'll be able to find your own stories, and you'll be able to relate to them in your own way, so that you can see the bigger picture as it stands. This is where I'll end my presentation right now. So I'll just briefly reiterate what I said, that why we're coming out with it and how we do it and why it matters. Next, I would ask Kiran to take forward. I'll just...
Okay. Thank you, Rajit. May I request Kiran? Kiran is another author of this report, and may I request now Kiran quickly actually give us that from where and how and why we actually process this data.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, I'll start with from where Rajit had stopped. Rajit mentioned about finding the right numbers. It's one of the most important steps that we take to record this book, and most of the time goes in finding the right data for this book, because data has to be very authentic. Okay, so I'll just begin by saying that this is an annual statement on the year's developments that we make through the numbers, and in this, the most important part is that we ensure is taken care of. The data that we collect is topical, because it's an annual report on the state of environment through numbers. So that's the first thing that we keep in mind. And and we also ensure that the data that we will be finding out for this report is actually relevant to people. People will be looking for those numbers, so that it also helps them do better in the future. Okay. Next slide, Sukanya. And it's also important, like when you put out numbers, people are keen to look at the trends through the numbers. That's very important. So we keep all these things in mind when we look for right numbers. And people often complain that there's not enough data in the public domain. But I don't believe that. I say that numbers are there, but the challenge is getting the right numbers at the right time and pushing out those numbers for a change. Okay, so I'll focus on that part. And this book specifically focuses on official data that's in the public domain. Okay, and in fact, you'll be surprised to see that if you ask me experience in the past 5 years, government websites have some of the websites have really done a good work, and if people really know how to go through those websites, you will find a wealth of information over there that's actually hidden. And this report is actually an effort to unlock that hidden wealth that the websites have. Okay? And within that wealth, what we focus for the most important things are the dashboards that the government websites have got, the parliamentary reports that come out very often during the sessions, the CAG audit reports. People just see these reports in a critical way. But again, these reports have information that's what most of us are looking forward to. And if you ask me, okay. Sukanya, the first slide, just go to earlier slide. Just be there, Sukanya. Yeah. The previous one. The previous one. Back. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, here. Now, in this context, I want to share experience on through dashboards. For example, the dashboard on Narega. It's a fantastic tool that government has put out. It has wealth of information. But many of us, in fact, me and Rajit, when we worked on the book, we thought it's we have just seen in the single perspective. We never thought that this will have wealth of resources on different aspects. For example, asset creation under NREGA that we don't often think about. Experts do know about these things, but laymen usually don't know about these things. So the effort, it's a wonderful effort put up by the government, but we found one major problem with the dashboard this time. They have two different interfaces. One is for the government, one is for the public interface. And when we compare data that was in the public interface, there was a difference. And so it's also an experience to scroll through the dashboards. And it's a skill that we have learned. We have ensured that we have used the right numbers to bring out the right, in the right way to the report. So the data on NREGA that we have in the report is to the government's actual dashboards, it's also for the public dashboards, because there was some discrepancy on the public dashboards. Okay. Similarly, there was one more problem with the Niti Aayog dashboard on SDGs. When we saw the dashboard last year, it was a wonderful tool that was put out, but it's not working anymore. That has to be fixed. And in fact, we have also written to the Niti Aayog, we have informed those people, but it is still not working. So that's, you have good dashboards, but they have to be working so that people can use them when they want to use it. That is still not happening. So Niti Aayog dashboard on SDGs has to be fixed. That's what we want to say. CPCB data, that is, it's a great tool, it's a great resource that's been put out. It's a wonderful effort. Yes, there are things to be improved, but yet you have enough things to talk about on through these numbers that CPCB puts out regularly. They have wonderful resources on air. They have got manual data that they collect regularly. You have got automatic real-time data over there. So it's a great resource. There are many other resources the report has used, but probably these are my the most favorites, I will say, that we have used in this report this time. So the next slide. Yes. So now, so what do? So what we have realized is the data was scattered across different websites, but when we brought together all these numbers at one place, you have a bigger picture, and that's a great learning that we are always often come across through this report. Every report has got its own message that comes out very clearly. And for example, this report, when the report was out, when we finally we are reviewing it, we found that the report has data at 3 distinct levels. First, global level, but global in context of where India stands, that was our priority. And that we try to focus on SDGs, the most talked about topic nowadays. And then we realized, yes, India has slipped in this context. And we also compared India with South Asian countries just to just give more relevance to those numbers. Second important thing we did in this report, and that we found is coming out very clearly in the report is, so next slide, please. Yeah. When we look to see the report complete as a package, you clearly see, unlike the last 4 reports that we have brought up so far, this report has got has done a deep dive into state level data and district level data as well. For example, when we see the state of states chapter in the report, it's clear, very clear. It's a ranking on governance, but when you see the entire package in one go, all 10 indicators of which the states have been ranked, you'll find that even the top leading states like Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, they are lagging behind in agriculture and water sector. And that's where India needs to focus on. That's a big message that the report shows. But again, when the numbers are put together in one place. Second, agriculture. Data on farmer suicide was there. It was there. Everybody's aware of that. But then what we found was that there were 4 new states where suicide are being reported now. That means it also makes us question why is this happening? Is there enough work being done? Then livestock, same instance over there. There was news reports on livestock saying that the livestock numbers have increased. Okay, but what we found was the most troubling number in the report was stray cattle, and they have been found in places where they were not there earlier. For example, northeast states. You'll find that in the report. Again, unemployment. It's a crisis, and that has remained since we have worked on the report. All 5 editions of the report have been covering unemployment. Every year we cover that. And we have realized that the crisis has further worsened and worsened every year. And this year, more worse, things will be bad in the months to come due to the pandemic. But what is available very clearly in this report as well is state level numbers. They are frightening. Okay? And I would urge you to buy the report and see the numbers that we have put out on the state front. They're really scary numbers, and I hope that these numbers are used very seriously. There are other issues, for example, forest, waterways. Each of these chapters that book covers talks about the state level problems. Besides state, it's interesting to find that the report also spoke about district level indicators this time, especially the forest. All over, when the report was out on the state of India's forest this time, people were talking about state level problems in the forest cover and the other issues that have been talked about. Okay? There are many critiques in the news reports. But what we have found interestingly is the data on the forest at district level. Okay? We have especially focused on areas where the forest cover has come down. And when you see the report, you will find the report has got interesting, important insights on the northeastern region that needs to be prioritized in case of forest cover. In fact, our government's Green India mission is supposed to work on this, and we do hope that this report is considered by that mission for the focus on northeastern region this time. Similarly, the interesting numbers on districts in the area of water and migration as well, and you'll see if there are journalists in this group. Let me tell you something very interesting. This single report will give you at least 500 different stories at one go. Okay? So this report is a wealth of information that can be used to create stories and stories in this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much, Kiran. I think, as I told, every data is a story, I think. So this report is all about stories and need to be told, also retold. And now I think if you look at it, the kind of efforts go into this annual publications, I think the findings and the key data that come out. So I'll invite now Sunita ji to make that presentations and make public a few of the findings. And here, Sunita ji.
Kiran and Richard, thank you, and Rajit. And Kiran, thank you. I think what you have done, and I hope everyone has heard, you have very beautifully captured the actual findings in this report. And some of the things that we have found, you and Rajit have found when you have done a deep dive into data. And I think it's very important. I think it's also important for us to acknowledge, and as Rajit did very well, that it's really about using the power of infographics to be able to tell these stories. And data is absolutely the basis of anything which is a fact. And it's good that we are using government data, and I think it's important for them to know that we are using it and that their dashboard, therefore, needs to be kept up. Richard, what I'm going to do is actually tell the story of the state of environment as is emerged from the report. And that's what my presentation is, as I see the key facts on the state of environment. Tomorrow is the World Environment Day. The question today is, what is the state of environment? And I am going to use the presentation right now to actually talk about what does the report say in terms of the state of the environment. So firstly, this is the report. It's downloadable, and it's also a priced publication, very nominal. And again, I want to join my colleagues in plugging it. Please do buy it. Every penny you give us goes into our corpus. So our publications really allow us to sustain the research we do. So please do help us on that. It's also the time when we are doing the Hindi Down to Earth, where we are putting this information together. So I hope you have, if you have not, please also subscribe to the Hindi Down to Earth. I think it's a very important way for us to keep in touch and for us to keep on this environment journey. Every day is Environment Day for us, as Richard very clearly said. So the book, as you will see, and I'm just giving you a glance of this, and Kiran and Rajat have already spoken about it, but it's really got a very deep dive into the state of forest, the state of air, the state of climate change, the state of energy, and there's very, very good data, as Rajat very clearly said, on the performance of discoms. And there's deep data there. The state of biodiversity, the state of habitat, waste, agriculture, migration, and of course the COVID story, the data that Richard talked about. So the report is really deep, rich, and each infographics tells a story. That is something that I will leave to you. As you buy the report, as you will see it, you will be able to understand what does it actually tell you about the state of river basins in India or groundwater availability. But the big story that is emerging from the report is, number one, very clearly across the world and in India, extreme weather events are increasing. If you look at the data that has been put together in the report, then from global economic risks, out of the 4 global risks in terms of likelihood, the climate risk remains, the extreme weather risk remains at the top. The issue of the same thing is in India, and it's very important for the data that we have and that you will see to show that the extent of extreme weather events and the devastation that they are causing on the economy. The report also shows you the variations in heat and cold and how they are increasing. And the bottom line talks about the lost lives. And it's very important for us to understand that whether it's heat or whether it's cold, it leads to both an impact on the livelihood, but also it loses us lives. And that's really what this data shows us. But there's also impact on the lives of people. And this, as we keep saying, is a double whammy. It's not just about climate change and extreme weather events. It's also the fact that you have agrarian distress and the issue of farmer suicide. And as Kiran said, we have new states that are joining. Why are they joining? Why are fishing families, when the data gets disaggregated, you start understanding why are fishing families in such deep poverty? Is this not an irony when the government talks about, creating wealth out of marine resources, and yet the fishermen in our country are in deep distress? So what is this and how can this be fixed? The issue of livestock, and I'm only showing one here, but the report has some fascinating data on stray livestock. And I think this outcome needs to be understood because this is having a direct impact on the livelihoods of farmers. And it's important for us to understand that today. Now, if you add on this, the toll from COVID, it is very clear that you have a massive, massive impact. Whether it is, the first graph is really the data put together on COVID, infection rates, deaths, but then is the economic, the job crash, and the food insecurity that is going to grow. And again, huge impacts on the lives of people in terms of people already living on the margins, and how will this impact? It's too small over here, but you will see the balloons, the large impacts happening in our part of the world. And when you see this data, you will see this data is from World Bank and other sources, but it tells you what is the impact that is going to happen with COVID. Then comes the migrant story. As I said, the human face, both of climate change and the human face of poverty, the human face now of COVID. Very clear, we have a poorer world. That is very clear from the data that has been put out. There is some evidence of internal displacement. There is another chart which talks about disaster-related displacement. And when you see that chart, you will see India is at the top of the highest number of internal displacements because of weather-related events, disasters. But there is new data that has been put out on the Shramik trains. So latest data collected from the government websites, portals, to tell you how many people have actually been transported home. which tells you of the human face of migration in the country, how people are having to leave their villages, move to cities, and how they live in such appalling conditions in the cities where they are hit doubly, one by COVID, the risk of infection because of their living conditions, their poverty, and two, because of the loss of livelihoods. And that's really the data that comes out in this report. The sixth point clearly is, but we need to build new futures, new directions for growth. Performance of Manrega, Kiran talked about it. And I'm so glad that we have looked at the dashboard of Manrega, because we are pushing and we must push the issue of natural resource asset building through Manrega. And we need to understand from these figures how many ponds are being built, how many tanks are being dug, what is the sustainability of these systems. And that's really where jobs, employment, which we know today, Manrega is at its peak, but then Manrega for what? And that's where the dashboard becomes so critical to use. But if we want to build a greener, more inclusive future, we cannot do this if our natural resources are under threat and if governance is not adding up. Now, this is where this database will help you to understand the state of our rivers, the state of groundwater availability, the state of our forest cover, the state of our forests, our fauna and fauna. Again, official data disaggregated, put together clearly to show you the trends, and they show you where we are going wrong. And that's important for us to use this data for, so that we can make the corrections. And as Kiran said, data is down to the district level in many cases. So we can actually figure out where things are going wrong and where things are going right, so that we can make better governance choices. The other point very clearly is that green growth is not possible when health is compromised. City after city, state after state, data has been put together on how many ambient air quality monitoring stations there are, so that we understand there is transparency, we understand what is our ability to even monitor the quality of air. I keep talking about this as a conspiracy of silence. Today, tests in COVID is becoming the same kind of issue. You don't test, so you don't know you're infected or not. You don't check for pollution, so you don't know how bad your air is. But it's getting better. Pressures from all of us, the outrage on air pollution is helping to improve monitoring, but still there are gaps. And that's what the data, what this report shows you. It's also linked to groundwater contamination. Clearly, water is a deciding factor for health. Groundwater usage is going up. As this report shows you, groundwater usage is going up and is a critical part of our water security today. But then contamination is also going up. And the data from government's own sources tell you how many districts and what is the groundwater contamination problem. As the monitoring is happening, it's important for us to recognize it and ask for corrections to be taken. Municipal waste is in our face, we know that, and it adds to the health burden. Again, the State of India's Environment Reports puts together the data state by state of how much waste is collected, how much is transported, and how much is processed. Data. But the most important data that I think Kiran and Rajat have put together is really the issue about governance. And this is from government's own data sources, the question of ranking of states, when it comes to different indicators, whether it is overall good governance, whether it is agriculture and allied services, whether it is human resource development, whether it is public health, whether it is environment. And you will notice one very interesting thing. Now, when the ranking comes, even when it comes to human resource development, there is a rank 3, which is Arunachal Pradesh, or when it comes to public health, there is a rank. But when it comes to environment, nobody makes the grade. It's actually the best rank is 4. So it's clearly something that we need to understand. And of course, water resource management, critical in this day and age. So there may be problems in the way this data reflects the reality, but the fact is when we use it and when we start putting better understanding on that data, governments will also improve the indicators that are used, because data is about assumptions and indicators. But at least we now know what then is the indicator used to say which state has better public health and which is worse off today, as far as government's own data is concerned. Environment, as I talked about, water resources. So the last slide is really, and I thought the most interesting slide was put together was about, India's commitment in terms of climate change. Clearly, we have made our desire to lead very clear. We have stronger, clearer commitments as compared to our proportionate share to the problem of climate change. We have gone out there to say we will do it. We have shown a desire to lead. We have also got an opportunity to lead. A graphic put together, data put together on ecotourism tells you the huge opportunity of nature-based solutions that exist in the country. So the opportunity exists. We want to take leadership. Now, I hope this data, presented as it is, factually, with no editorializing, just the facts put out to tell you the state of art. I hope this will help us to fix what is clearly broken, as this State of India's Environment report clearly shows. So thank you very much, Richard, for asking me to do this. Very nice.
Thank you very much, Sunita ji. I think you almost put out the main findings of the report, but again, request, it's just 200 rupees.
We are really plugging our desperation, yes.
No, I think that's a donation we need to keep up this good journalism at a time when everybody wants it. And now is the question and answer session. Can I request Sunita ji, will you field few questions?
Yes.
Then you can direct to Kiran and Rajit also as well as.
I want to start with Nihar Majan's question, very important question that Nihar has asked. And I want to ask both Kiran and Rajit to answer that. How do you check the authenticity of the data? Like most of the data, especially in the water sector, data is outdated often, it is missing and inaccurate. So how do you tackle this problem? I think it's a very, very critical problem, critical issue that Nihar has asked. Thank you so much, Nihar, for asking it. Please go ahead, first Kiran and then Rajit. And then Richard, you as well.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, first of all, because as I told you, we actually use the government data just to avoid this question. Because where else do you go? You have to go to government, because you have to believe someone. And for us, government is the God in this case. If you talk about data on water issues specifically. But there have been occasions when we had some doubts and we have tried to contact the ministries for more clarifications. For example, let me take an example of data in the parliament. There was an instance where we had compared data in the parliament with the government report, the annual report. Okay? So we check for data in 3 different places. The parliament is one source, we do check. The annual reports, the audit reports. So we can attempt to check 4 or 5 different sources of the same ministry. That's one of the ways that we are doing. And talking to people and experts at times. Beyond that, it's a difficult question to answer, frankly speaking.
Rajit?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So one thing that I have and we have realized over the years is that data is just the ingredient to tell the story. So data is not the story in itself. So we try not to fix it. So basically, we are part of the society and we know what is happening around us. So we basically use data as a tool to tell what the story is. So the focus is the message. And when you look at it in that perspective, you realize that data is basically can be, even if it is slightly outdated, but if the trend is showing, like this year we've used census data of 2011. And we are now slowly and steadily realizing that what are the broad trends shown in census data is actually true, as the data on migration is actually coming out. So the focus is the message and not on the data itself. Richard, any other point that you want to add to this?
Want to add to this?
Okay, I can just tell you, bringing out a magazine using data always, authenticity is definitely is a big issue. But particularly coming to the state of environment, India's environment in figures, where you use huge amount of data to be crunched and to be authenticated. I'll just give you an example. Last year, there was a data, and one honorable member of parliament raised a question using that data from our book, and that was directed to the Ministry of Water, Drinking Water, and we got a call from the Ministry of Water Resources saying that from where you got this data. And we said that actually we sourced from your site. So just to put it, authenticate data is definitely, but I'll just put you that it's all government data. It goes through a very rigorous process of checking and cross-checking. As Kiran said, every doubt you have. So you actually cross-check with the original source. Sometimes it does happen that the Ministry of Water Resources didn't know that they had the data and we have already used it. Similarly, look at the Manrega. But yes, authentication happens at the real source level. For example, I can give you on the COVID data. It all comes from the IMF and World Bank economists. And we did actually converse with them to understand it, whether it will hold true for 2020. How you have done this. Sometimes we go into the actually index and the parameters. Remember, most of the big stories are hidden in the parameters and how they collect data. So we do those kind of authentications to bring out the untold story behind the data actually. So if you look at it like this, Manrega data, it has been compared with the last year, compared with the winter, compared with the summer. You might not find all those things right there, but then the verdict has been given that yes, there is a big spike. Otherwise, anybody can tell you during the summer the job demands goes up. But it goes through just to tell you that at least 5 layers of authentications. And if the source has faulted on the data or in the collations or their integrity is at questions, yes, we might. But we try our best to actually cross-check and authenticate it well according to situations.
Before I get to other questions, I've got very, very good questions. People, I'm going to ask you all to keep it brief because it's incredibly good questions and I want to really discuss it a little bit before we run out of time. Two quick people have asked, what is CPCB? It's a Central Pollution Control Board. What is Manrega? Is the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Act. So you will find it all in the report, but very quickly, I think just to tell you, I've also got a number of people asking how to buy it, how to download it, where to download it. Richard, if at the end, before we close, can you give us the site address so that people can actually download it and buy it? And yes, it's available in electronic form only right now. So please do buy it. But let me ask this question that I have from Ritika. I really want to, this is a question Ritika has asked, which has touched me very much because it bothers me a lot. And I thank you so much for asking it, Ritika, which is Ritika Dubey. If we quote official data to the government to activate change, do you fear they will stop putting this data out to the public altogether? It's not a rookie question, Ritika. I think it's a perfect question to ask because it does bother us. And we often find the minute we have used it, that website disappears, but we can't stop. Richard?
I agree with you. In fact, our experience also shows that the moment you become very nagging with using government data to bring out stories, it does disappear. If you go to any government site now which deals with beneficiaries in large number, they have a MIS system. And MIS system actually more than the dashboard, we used to earlier refer to the MIS system. In most of the ministry, the MIS has been disabled now. So you just get the headline figure. Then you actually investigate yourself to go beyond the dashboard. So MIS figure, for example, toilet coverage last year. So that was stopped in between. So when we started saying that, this minister constituency will take 60 years to be open defecation free, those kind of things. But yes, I think it's an hazard. It has happened. And beyond that, what else you can say? We have to mount another layer of investigation to get the data. But we do get data, definitely.
No, I think that's an important point. And I think, it also relates to another point, and I'm not going to labor it because I think you have asked it, but just, a lot of people have expressed doubts about the authenticity and government data and the fact that it could be outdated. I think my colleagues have answered it. The fact is, there is one important data source. And what our report often shows us, that when you bring out the data and you reveal the data, it actually helps you to understand trends better. And it helps government itself to understand what is happening. Now, sometimes it's a shock and awe, and government then stops sharing that data. But in many cases, it helps us. And of course, as data from third party is also collected and sourced, we also put that together. So I think let's use this for what it is, rather than saying that this is authentic or not. Government is, we have elected a government, it is authentic, we use it. And then of course, as you highlighted, and government's own data is showing the state of water pollution is going up, the state of groundwater contamination is going up. Forest cover has a problem in many states. So I think let's understand that government's own data is showing us the trends that I just talked about. Okay. Now, there is another question on the whole issue of state level data. Can I get people to answer that? What does this report include state level data and district level data? Rajat and Kiran?
Yeah. So in some of the chapters it does, in some of the chapters it doesn't. Like in the case of MGNREGA, we have, what we've tried to do is MGNREGA, the reason why we picked it up is right now with the rural migration happening, bulk of the people. So the beauty of the scheme is that any adult in rural India can demand work from the government, and the government has to guarantee 100 days of work to that individual. So with the unemployment rising and people going back to rural India, people would be demanding, which is clearly visible in the data that we have right now. So what we've done over there is we realize that not all states are struggling with the migration problem equally. So we have tried to put state-wise performance of the scheme over the past 7 years, so that we understand how the states will react to it. So wherever it has been important, we have given the state-wise data. Similarly, in the case of groundwater contamination, we realize that groundwater found in one district in a state it is important to give the state district level data. So we've got groundwater data at the district level. So it depends on what kind of data we're looking at and whether it helps us tell the story that we want to do. That is what decides whether we've taken the state or the district level data.
Okay. I have Anji Soor asking, how sustainable or achievable are the 17 goals with respect, this is SDG goals, with respect to India's commitment? So Rajat and Kiran, what did you find? And would you like to, should I show some of those graphics on the SDGs?
Yeah, you can, yeah.
If I can, you people start answering it, I will just pull them out.
Rajat, answer that question, okay?
So it's a mixed bag thing. So on the one hand, we are last year we looked at India. So the most fundamental thing, I don't know. So the most fundamental thing about SDG is India till very recently did not have the indicators to even ascertain whether they are progressing on most of the SDG goals. So the latest Niti Aayog report on SDGs, India for the first time has data on 16 out of the 17 SDG indicators. So it definitely has progressed. However, when we compare India's progress with other countries, so there is a dashboard that we refer to, India's position is slipping. And India's position is slipping primarily because of SDG 1, which talks about poverty, So India's progress has gone down on those parameters. So individual parameters that is slipping, but India definitely has more parameters now, or more SDGs are being monitored in India for the first time, which is remarkable.
So as you can see, I'm sharing that graphic from the report, the Sustainable Development Goals, and it shows that India's rank has slipped by 1 place from last year, primarily downgraded in SDG 1, which is to end poverty from challenges remains significant, and SDG 6, clean water and sanitation.
This is vis-a-vis the global standing of India.
That's
then
right.
we have also looked at India in state level data on SDG, ma'am. You can in the book itself.
I'm going down. I'm explaining. So this is the indicators that you have, and these are the different indicators. And then this is the preparedness of different states.
Yeah. So over here, you can actually see that the performance has improved both in terms of how much we are now measuring for the first time. So I remember, if I'm not wrong, last time we had around 11 or 12 of the indicators, 17 indicators. We were measuring only certain amounts of it. Now we are measuring 16 of the SDGs. That is remarkable, I think, in a way. But that does not mean that we can slip in the performance. So there are two parts of it. So we are now covering much more. The government has the intent right, but that does not mean that we slip on the coverage, which is also something which should be bothering.
And this then is the overall SDG score of different states based on the indicators that are there, right?
Niti Aayog, yeah. This is the Niti Aayog indicators that are there.
That's right. Okay, so let me stop share and I'll come back to it in case there are any questions, other questions. Why is the book's availability showing out of stock? Somebody is trying to purchase it.
Can I answer? I think it will be available after this webinar is over, because it is technically a release.
But it should have been available.
But keep buying. I think 2 of them have already bought, so keep buying it before you leave this webinar.
Don't worry. This is just a glitch on our side. Please, please, don't take this. We'll try again. And Richard, please call Rama. Please call somebody to please upload it right away. Okay.
No, it's there. It just the function is on, because we are used to so much of this physical function and things. So you will guys please buy.
Fine. I'm just looking at what are the questions. Data, but does the data used by CSC for affecting existing policies, drafting newer ones? Data on fly ash utilization is about current generation, Ministry of Power, ash, etc. So let me answer this, because yes, a lot of the data is used for policy. That's why, as Rajit said, every data, the effort is to tell a story. The effort is to tell you, what does the data reveal? It's not just numbers thrown at you, but the idea is to tell you what is happening. Now, 15 days ago, we have released our report on the thermal power standards. And there we had a lot of this data on thermal power plants. And next time, maybe, Kiran, you should include fly ash data and more on thermal power plants from this information. So I think clearly, the questions are basically, a lot of them are about PPT, but please, Richard, I think the one lesson we are learning right now, and forgive us, we will make sure we correct it next time, that we won't be technically like some bureaucrat. We'll make sure that the book is available for download and for sale, even as the webinar is going on, and not wait for the webinar to be over, because that's the mistake we have clearly made. I can see many of you trying to buy it and many of you complaining. I'm really sorry, really sorry about this, but please forgive us and please go back and buy it. This has been a real glitch on our side, and we will do it. I'll take the last question from Jonathan Singsit. Where do we draw the line between harvesting natural resources and environmental care? With the NBWL and the Forest Advisory Committee recently approving projects haphazardly, and the EIA, how does one hold the boards accountable? Let me answer that on all your behalf. I think that's a June 5th question. World Environment Day question. I think, Jonathan, very important. I mean, today we have to hold governments responsible for this. And the fact is, we are seeing that in spite of the fact that in COVID, we saw blue skies and we saw an improvement of the environment, now that we are opening up, we are seeing the same desperation to get back a brown economy. And there will be efforts to dilute many of these laws as well as to fast track the clearances. But it's also equally important to understand that some of these processes have become so corrupt and so bad that actually we cannot defend them. The EIA process is really about clearance. It just is that they take longer to clear a project because there is some public scrutiny on it. But every project gets cleared. That's what our database shows. And the fact is that the project gets cleared with a lot of conditions, and the conditions often are not implementable. So we basically find that we are it's a farce, it's a mockery. And I think it's important for us to recognize that we must ask for both reform and effective functioning of these processes as much as we ask for accountability. And that is often something that we as NGOs are a little hesitant to do, because the minute we ask for reform, we believe, and it does happen, that government uses that to dilute it further. So we don't want dilution, we want streamlining, we want improvement, but we recognize that the current process is not working either for the environment or the economy. And I think that's where we have to stand differently to ask for something to happen. So I hope, Richard, that the report is now available for download and for purchase.
Yeah, it's activated.
It's activated.
So release is over.
Us before buying it. As I said, that 200 rupees you contribute, and I'm not joking about this. I will share with all of you. All this money goes into what we call our corpus, and it pays for CSC's long-term sustainability. So it allows us to keep doing the research we do. So I am actually hoping that you will find it useful. We also ask for money because we believe that information should have a value. And that is something that our founder, director, Anil Agarwal, taught us. He priced the first report of State of India's Environment Report in 1982. And at that time, people said to him, why do you want to price it? I mean, we want this information out. And he said, no, if you pay 100 rupees for a piece of information, you will value it. You will also come back to us if you find there are problems with it. And we look forward to that. Because if it's a free download, you will read it, you will not even read it. You'll probably just, we are already overloaded with information. So I think it's important. I hope you find a value in our information. I hope you will use it, will read it. And I will give an opportunity to all three of my colleagues for final words before I close. I will start with Kiran, then Rajat, then Richard. Kiran?
Thank you, Sundaji. So this is the message for all the journalists if they are in the group. There are hundreds of stories in the book. So please read the book, download it, and write stories based on this. You'll have hundreds of stories for the entire year. I can guarantee that. So that's my...
They will say their editors are not giving them any space to write, but that's the COVID problem. But we need to keep getting information out. So that's our job. But yes, thank you, Kiran. Brilliantly done and very interesting presentation. Rajat?
I would love to have feedbacks from you people once you read it, because I'm sure you'll find a lot of things meaningful and a lot of things that can be improved upon. This is one thing that we welcome feedback as much as possible. So that is something that we would be looking forward to as from the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajat. Richard?
I think, first of all, thank you all to be here. And I can only say that this is the fifth edition of State of India's Environment in Figures. And those who have already bought the 4th one and buy the 5th one, you will actually see what kind of changes are taking place. So this is not to plug in and market the book again, but if possible, buy the last 4 ones also. And when you actually buy the 5th one, you might get an access to the 4th one also. But just to conclude, to say that, whether it's good or bad, the numbers, if you just plot it according to chapters in the last 5 years, the results are actually fascinating, very telling, and on your face. So that's why I use this book as more of a reminder. to ourselves. Thank you again very much. Thank you, Sunita ji.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Rajit. And just to conclude, there are a lot of very interesting questions you've asked. A lot of them have to do with the subject itself. And, I'm not answering them right now because CSC has been doing webinar after webinar on many of the issues that you have raised the questions on. And it would take a huge amount of time for me to answer whether it's about EIA, whether it's about human-wildlife conflict, whether it is... whether it is about desalination. I think these are issues that we will continue to discuss. But today is really about the state of environment. It's about understanding what are the trends. Are we beginning to see the big picture on the state of environment and what does the data show? And that is why we have deliberately used the data that is publicly available, that cannot be disputed, and that data shows the facts that exist. And that is why it's important to do this. And I want to point out the last thing from Poonam Kataria. Thank you, Poonam. Thank you so much. She has said, I am a statistician myself, trying to cry hoarse that data can speak if processed correctly. Exactly, Poonam. And that's what our effort is. So thank you so much for saying what we have tried to do in this report, because I believe the state of the environment is best told through the data. And that's what our effort has been. So thank you for joining us, and thank you so much for all your questions and for staying with us. And once again, I hope you will go to our website and download the report.
Bye.